meeting to order. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, clerk, call roll, please.
Counselor Ballin.
Here.
Counselor Elliott.
Here.
Counselor Fisher.
Here.
Counselor Scott.
Here.
And Counselor Wieskamp.
Here.
Counselor Grizzle is absent today.
Okay, and today's going to be a work session. The City of Lebanon work sessions are less formal meetings that enable the council to focus on and explore in detail a topic with staff and or consultants. Like regular meetings of the council, citizens are encouraged to attend and observe work sessions. Please note that unlike regular city council meetings, work sessions do not include public hearings or other opportunities for citizen comments. Should action be required, that topic would be brought back to the next available regular session, at which time citizens would have the opportunity to comment before a formal action is taken. And today's topic for our work session is going to be interim city manager discussion. And who would you like to start off, John?
As I think most of you are aware, obviously, that we're in a process of transition, and you always have to ask yourself, well, how can that transition process best be managed until the new permanent city manager is here, and he or she has a chance to get familiar with the city and so on. And contemplating that whole process, a couple of discussions in the area with Trey Kennedy and some of the staff people, I kind of increasingly grew in my mind the thought that probably, particularly if we get the right interim city manager, that transition process might actually be facilitated by having an interim city manager. And then I became aware that through a common friend that John Nelson might be available, which was, I didn't know that. I knew he'd served in that capacity in Dallas last year, but I wasn't sure at all that he'd be willing to undertake such a burden again. But so John and I had a very nice conversation. I should back up a little bit. I've known John Nelson since I've been in Oregon. Met him just about 15 years ago. John's always been a respected leader, kind of, if you, well, I won't say elder statesman, younger statesman, amongst the city managers in Oregon for a long time. Very respected amongst his peers. Had quite a cross-section of experience here in Oregon. He's a man I always personally admired and appreciated. The many meetings, seminars, and so on that I attended in common with John, and many of which John was a presenter at. I was always impressed with his personal demeanor, his communication skills, as well as the material and the information that he was communicating or sharing. So after a phone conversation a couple or so weeks ago, and found out that John Nelson was potentially at least interested in coming and helping us here in an interim capacity. The next step then was to set up a meeting with the mayor, which occurred last week, just to kind of talk ideas and viewpoints, and for John to get to know the mayor and the mayor to get to know John. And then it was felt like, well, let's do that on a council-wide basis, just informally, so that John will have an opportunity to share a little bit about it himself, with, of course, the brief snapshot that I gave you, and he in turn will have an opportunity to ask you questions, get to know all of you before deciding whether or not even to proceed further. And I think the mayor and I think are in agreement that if either John feels this maybe isn't the best fit for him, or you feel that maybe John isn't the best fit for you, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to leave the room with hard feelings, or anybody's going to be unhappy, or feel that they were not appropriately treated or considered. Again, just an opportunity to explore an option. In this case, coming in at some appropriate point to assist the city with the interim city manager role. So Did I cover it from your side reasonably well, John?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you say it very well. This is no harm, no foul. If any side doesn't think there's a fit here, as John did say, I retired in 2011, and I did some golfing and a little bit of travel, and we're encouraged to get back to the profession that assisted us in our livelihood, and so I did accept a 6-month assignment with the city of Dallas as their interim manager that ended in December of last year. And like that, like the interaction, I don't mind golfing and walking the dog and reading and doing a little consulting work on the side, but I did frankly miss the problem solving and the interaction with staff as well as with elected officials and citizens. So I kind of wanted as my retirement goal to stay a little bit involved in the profession and look for interim opportunities over the next several years at least. This John called and John and Paul and I had a good conversation. Certainly felt that I could work well with Paul and wanted to just make myself primarily available to you for your questions of me to see if it was good from your perspective.
Could you move the mic just a little closer? Thank you.
Do I have to turn it?
Is that,
Yeah, I think that's.
it should have a red button.
The red is on
There we go.
there.
There you go.
Corvallis always had their council meetings on TV, so I joke with my family that I've been on TV more than Barney Fife. So now you can pick me up.
Okay, well, any questions?
Paul,
Yeah.
maybe you, since you've clearly done some thinking and research on this, just maybe share with us the thinking you've been going through in your own mind over the last several weeks and months regarding the necessity for an interim manager, and just maybe just share with us some of the things and conversations you've gone through.
Yeah, I hadn't thought too much about an interim because I thought John was gonna carry through towards the end. Just in talking more with John, it just seems like it would be a better fit at this point for, he desires, if you don't mind me saying.
No.
I think he would
Well,
desire.
John said so.
Yeah, he was ready to go in November, so, I mean, he's really helped us out to this point, and I think that with someone of the caliber of John, that's what got me a little bit excited about this prospect, is that would be a good fit. John can then have his time off, and we have somebody who could really help us. The question that I had when we had our meeting, or actually that John asked me, was what would I like to see an interim city manager do? And what I said was employee morale. That was the biggest thing. I want to see him gap the bridge between John and the new city manager. And I think, in talking with John, I think that he would be the person that could do that. We don't have to go far and wide. We have somebody that's available. That was the other thing, question that I had asked you, is your availability, and he's available throughout the summer. So there's some positives, and I know John has to go in May, so we have a 3-week period in May. So you just kind of add all those things up, and that was the thinking that I had. So.
I should probably share too, if I may, my approach in Dallas, and I'm always open to feedback and doing it a better way, but there's no agenda at all other than it's your organization and your city, and I'm here just to facilitate an interim period. So I did spend time in Dallas, at least initially, working and meeting with the mayor and council president. I then made myself available to all of the councilors that wanted to visit about issues that they may have wanted to talk with me about. I have weekly regular department director meetings, or I always have in my career, that includes the department director and the city clerk, just to go over the issues of the day for the organization, as well as what's coming up on the agenda. I'm one of those people that don't lock themselves up in their office. At least in Dallas, I had a lot of fun going around to different departments and meeting the employees. And the hardest thing in the world to people, in my opinion, is change. And you're in a period of change, and a lot of times it's just having somebody out there telling people that sometimes, while change is hard, it's always going to happen, and we'll get through this and be in good shape for the new manager when they come. And I interrupted you, Wayne, sorry.
That's what I guess I was gonna ask Paul, if your dialogue with John was in terms of his full-time interim. I mean,
Yes, yeah, and we talked about hours and, what your availability was, if you want to go over that maybe a little bit.
Yeah, my preference frankly is to do it hourly. Again, I'm open to however we would want to proceed if we do, but I worked 3.5 days a week for the city of Dallas, and I didn't want to put myself in a position of coming over and sitting and not having things to do, nor charging you for my time if there weren't good ways of using my time. So I would see this as a 3 to 4 days per week assignment on an hourly basis that doesn't have you loaded with any deferred comp or PERS or insurance costs. And if it's too much time or not enough time, we adjust as we go along based on conversations I would have with the mayor and the city council. But I don't frankly look at it as I prefer it not be a 40-hour-a-week position, because I still like to do some other things in my free time.
That's what
Trey, is a tradition that we have.
That's good stuff. That really is good stuff.
well, John, I've known of you and I've watched certainly the community of Corvallis over the years, and know that you've been a leader for them that has been appreciated and respected, and I certainly would look forward to having dialogue with you if we choose, and you choose to move forward as an interim and bridge this gap. As you know, you've probably done some due diligence in terms of what's going on here, your discussions with John and the mayor, so it's probably no skeletons.
No, Councilor, I agree, and Lebanon has a great reputation. I've been very impressed with your assertiveness in diversifying the local economy and setting the stage for the future. So, and I know, as John said, it's been a decade and a half that we've been going to our COG meetings and other meetings together. So certainly have a high appreciation for how the organization feels about the community, making sure it's setting a good path for the future.
John, what would you say was your biggest challenge in being the interim at Dallas?
Frankly, there were surprises in Dallas. I don't know if you're familiar with the situation, but they had a previous city manager that crashed and burned, is a nice way of describing what happened. And then they wanted me to come in and, for lack of a better word, just do some babysitting and make sure the organization knew that they were appreciated by the elected officials in the community as we went through this interim period. And that's fun and that's good, but I also got into, as a result of the PERS rates increasing, I started to look at whether we needed to do some interim adjustments to the budget. And that took me on the path of looking at the Dallas city budget, and they had, for lack of a better word, hadn't appropriately accounted for systems development charges and some utility fees over the past several years, which caused us to cut over $500,000 in programs and services mid-year just to mitigate the additional impacts that were coming this next fiscal year. So that was a very big challenge. I think we got through it in good shape with a very supportive mayor and city council and an organization that really wanted to do well for the future.
Speaking of those kinds of things, obviously those are the kinds of things that are surprising by their nature. And so it's hard to ask you what you expect to run into here because you'd be surprises. But typically, when an interim city manager arrives in an organization like this, how do you spend your time? I mean, you have the department managers who are doing the functional work, and, are you just kind of wandering around just making sure they know that there's somebody there if they need something, or you simply have a set of goals and objectives yourself? What's your target there?
Yes, I said, it's a good question, Counselor. I set up I briefed the council after 2 or 3 weeks of being in the organization, meeting with employees, with each of the department directors collectively every week as well as individually, with counselors individually as well as collectively. I shared with them just a status report of how I saw the balance of what I would be spending my time on in that interim period. And a lot of times it's just having somebody available as a resource for staff in particular, but also citizens. Corvallis, Dallas, I'm sure Lebanon, every time you got a change in administration, there's somebody out there with an issue or two that want to talk to the new person about getting their wrong righted, and so that will obviously happen with whoever comes in on an interim as well as a permanent basis. But I didn't go looking for work or activities as much as just let people tell me where they thought I should spend my time. And if we don't need you for more than 2 or 3 days a week or whatever it amounted to, that was fine with me. I wasn't there to neither to create work nor to raise anxiety levels as much as, hey, I'm a resource. I've been in big cities, I've been in smaller cities, and I've seen practices many different ways, and I may have some feedback for you to consider in terms of what I think would help the organization for the future.
We would probably be knee-deep in budget work almost immediately because the budget's being prepared. I don't know how historically how much time that takes, but I'm sure it's probably disproportionate to what it would be obviously after the budget's approved. Are you prepared for that?
Oh, yeah, I'm a pretty quick study when it comes to numbers. I think knowing John as well as I do, that budget is probably on a glide path to completion for the most part. I don't, certainly there'll be some budget commission meetings and explanations why you're doing this. In Dallas, and even in Corvallis, we would do a post-op after getting through the budget cycle, and then talk about what can we be doing better, both for the community that wants to know more about the numbers as well as the organization. So certainly my role in the budget process would probably be more one of observer, and we may want to consider this in the future, not know it all about the numbers.
Second question, I don't foresee any hitches in hiring a long-term city manager, but assuming that some unforeseen thing happens and that magic combination doesn't happen, and I think we're expecting early July or so to be some kind of finalizing package. And if something happened and we had to try again, are you available longer term?
Counselor, I am. I did share with the mayor and the city manager when we had our conversation last week that I've got a couple of different trips in the works. One is in June to go back to the Black Hills and then visit family. And then next fall, I have a potential trip to visit my youngest child who may have an overseas education experience that we would want to go over and visit. But I wouldn't just walk away and say I'm done. I would be available until you've got a full-time manager hired. Frankly, the market, what we learned in Dallas, and without disparaging any of the candidates, the market is pretty tight right now. There wasn't a lot of as many qualified candidates as I would have expected for the city of Dallas. Maybe you'll find that it'll be different for the city of Lebanon, but it was a pretty tight market. They ended up with what I think is a really quality individual, Ron Faulkner from Utah, as the new city manager there. So there was good they had 3 good candidates to look at and consider. But it was, there weren't 100 candidates, there were probably 20 or 25.
John, what was your role in that search for Dallas?
They used Nancy Boyer, who is their Council of Governments, also does recruiting for their firms. So a lot of times it's either the League of Oregon Cities or a private firm, as you're using, Kaufman, which is a good firm. Nancy Boyer was brought in from the Council of Governments. I've known Nancy forever, dating back to when she was with the League and then with the city of Newport and now the Council of Government Executive Director. So I sat in on all of the executive sessions where they developed the profile for what they were looking for on the position. I certainly, at the encouragement of the council, the city attorney, and the mayor, talked a lot about the profession, and while some of the councilors were concerned with the salary level or the benefits or moving expenses, I was able to share with them, you know, this is about getting to a point where you find a good fit and not getting too hung up on some expectations that are in the profession in terms of moving expenses and starting salary ranges. So actually Chad some suggestions on the profile that caused them to change it. So they were very courteous in terms of asking my opinion, and I gave it, and some of it they used and some of it they didn't, and that's the way it should be.
Thank you.
Any questions for us?
I don't think I do. I have an observation that just from your questions, I think that we could work well together. I appreciate where you're coming from and kind of reading between the lines on, okay, what are you going to spend your time with, and is this going to work for us as well as for you? So I appreciate the quality of your questions.
Mayor, just to express my opinion, I'm very pleased that Mr. Nelson's chosen to come over today and visit with us. And John, I would feel very comfortable working with you and having you as part of the community as we move forward. So just want to make that public that I'm very comfortable with the idea, and we look very much forward to working with you if that came about.
Well, I feel the same way. The qualifications and everything looks good to me.
Jason? I agree. Okay.
And I certainly do. And I look forward to, having just a fresh set of eyes too. It's beneficial for the community.
Yeah, I agree too.
I would encourage you to call Dallas or the city of Court, if you haven't already, if there's some folks that you can talk to and get their perspective there as well.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions, thank you very much, John. I appreciate you coming and spending time with us. Thank you.
Nice to see you all, or nice to see you again, and nice to meet you all. And I'm going to take my water with me.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right, thanks a lot.
See you later.
Thank you.
And just from a council agenda perspective, I just want to make sure, and I haven't talked to John Nelson about this, so but if would council be all right with considering a formal contract at your April 10th meeting? Again, I'm not sure
That's
how
next
quick, next week. I'm not sure how quickly he'd be able to start, and I'm not sure exactly, the transition between John and myself, but I mean, I'm confident that that process could work very smoothly, and I wouldn't anticipate any hang-ups or difficulties, so.
And I believe when we spoke in our meeting, I think he was saying in a couple of weeks he would be able to start.
Yes,
so.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing I didn't think to ask.
Yeah,
I think he's available sooner rather than later, so, yeah.
What was your discussions in terms of, I know he preferred hourly, is that kind of the direction that
I was thinking the same.
we're thinking?
Yeah, just a reminder, I'm hourly,
Yeah.
and those Of course, the city had, as part of my contract, agreed to pay my health insurance. That would not be necessary for John, he's on his own health insurance plan. So what he, I think, is asking is almost exactly the same when you factor in the health insurance as to what the city's currently paying me. So there really wouldn't be any financial stress or distress at all. And again, other than the times which I think could be fairly narrow, that we would both be here at the same time, but generally speaking, whatever transition he and I can work out with in conjunction with the mayor and the council, either he would be on the clock or I would be on the clock. It wouldn't be very often we'd be both of us. So budgetary impact should be essentially no change really from current.
Paul, I think that from my perspective, what I would be comfortable with would be if you and John and Mr. Nelson would maybe just put your heads together and decide what works for, primarily those two gentlemen, and maybe just bring that to the next meeting and as an agenda item. And it sounds to me like, pretty much I'm okay with whatever you guys can work out. I think the terms of the contract, as long as they're in the range of usual and customary, I think are going to be just fine probably. I would just ask you to bring that kind of thing back with our next convenience, and that way you have some flexibility to put your head together and work it out. It's probably easier to do that in a small group than a larger group.
John, what do you see as a time frame, or in terms of bringing him up to speed where you're comfortable and stepping back and letting him take the reins? Is that a...
This is going to be hard to say, and I won't really know until if the council approves it, and then he and I have a chance, in conjunction with the mayor, to work out an actual kind of, if you will, initial transition between me to him. But if I had to guess, we're probably looking at 10 days or so. His background is excellent. The only area that he doesn't have a strong background is in urban renewal. So we can drill down on that pretty quickly and go through that. And actually, as far as Ron Whitlatch is going to be conducting a lot of the actual day-to-day responsibilities with urban renewal for the near term anyway, at least until the permanent city manager. So while John Nelson would certainly be responsible for that, he has somebody on staff that I've had a lot of urban renewal work with over the years, and he and I, Ron Whitlatch and I, have had a lot of discussion about where do we go next with urban renewal. So he's going to have somebody here that's going to be able to work with him and have a good background.
Okay, well, we can work together and work on an agreement and then bring it back to the council meeting on the 10th next week.
Good.
After an agreement's made, if Mr. Nelson needed it, would you be available as a consultant?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would be happy to work with John and help him in any way I can, in May, June, July, August, September, whenever. And same thing with the new city manager when he or she is hired. If they have questions, they have concerns, they want some help, I'm happy to do it anytime. My goal is, a year from now, we're better off, stronger in every way than we are today. So I'm willing to do whatever I can do and to help make that happen.
Okay. Any other business? Comments? Meeting's adjourned.